I have seen things I cannot even articulate to you, given they exist outside the human frame of consciousness, and yet are so clearly real. I have seen 1,000 years pass in a single instant, and the sheer enormity of the human experience as expressed in that time with each individual soul and each individual life. I have seen 1,000,000 suns crash together at once, creating such a level of cosmic destruction
as to lead back to nothingness.
Oh, God. So, this was the elephant I was worried about before I did ayahuasca. Let me drink another cup of kratom.
Something happens. Something. They could take a weird drug, and all of a sudden they start to realize the real world is an illusion.
I engaged in this spiritual ceremony where I took this mind-altering substance known as ayahuasca.
I've heard from people that you've been taking ayahuasca like every couple hours. I don't know if that's true.
Yes, I'm taking it every 2 hours. Essentially, it gives me the neuroplasticity of a kid with the wisdom of an adult, so I can do anything. I am a superhuman.
I learned about the Temazcal in the Mayan jungle, where I found my Liver King shaman. So I had to bring it back to Liver King Ranch. Liver King 3.0 is the holy trinity of the truth. Insecure about a thing that is a paltry thing of flesh because my dick went to the left and I took Adderall. The holy trinity of the truth is vitamin K, ketamine.
Yo, acid and psychedelics have ruined a lot of people's lives as of late. We are seeing the long-term effects of LSD and psilocybin mushrooms use and ketamine. Why are you still peeling the onion and trying ayahuasca for the 10th time? I thought it was supposed to fix you the first time.
I mean, I think he was a normie who had a back injury and he wasn't cut out for the incel lifestyle. And so then he started experimenting with ayahuasca and like psychedelic drugs, and that's what drove him crazy.
The Oneshot Thesis?
Yeah, exactly. He got one-shotted.
Psychedelics, hallucinogens, plant medicine. There are many names for the various synthetic or natural compounds that, when taken at a sufficient dose, result in paradigm-shattering experiences. For as long as we can remember, people all around the world have encountered firsthand the reality-shifting effects of these substances. Perhaps the secrets of the universe are revealed to the user, allowing them to remember a primordial, ineffable truth that always was. Maybe the experience provides life-changing introspection, a catalyst for spiritual development. The possibilities seem endless. When referring to these compounds, some people prefer the term psychedelics, meaning mind-manifesting or soul-revealing. Others call them entheogens, referring to the manifestation of the divine within. Yet many others, skeptical of the very notion that such experiences are spiritual in nature, may refer to them as hallucinogens, implying that the things experienced on such trips are just that, hallucinations. Either way, these substances have recently had a great cultural resurgence, the likes of which hasn't been seen since the 1960s. Psychedelics are becoming so popular that even your parents are microdosing. People swear by them, often citing their miraculous benefits. But what if they're not all they're chalked up to be? You see, I'm setting out to investigate a more sinister implication behind the recent psychedelic frenzy in our culture. To understand exactly what these drugs mean for humanity, we must first address the question of why people are drawn to them in the first place. How do you know if someone's done psychedelics before? They'll tell you. You'll hear stories of how a simple mushroom or LSD trip cured someone's depression, anxiety, or healed their trauma. It helped them to see things in a new light, to appreciate the gift of life, or as unlikely as it may seem, make an atheist believe in God. I don't doubt that these substances have given people those realizations. But with any discussion of psychedelics, there are a lot of strange implications that bubble to the surface. certain questions inevitably arise, such as, why do psychedelics have the effect that they do? How could an ingested substance result in spiritual revelations? If we are to believe that we are more than just matter, and that the spiritual realm is real, then why are we here to begin with? Why do things exist at all instead of there being nothing? Some people think we're only here randomly, by unimaginably slim chances, by a set of extremely precise parameters that allowed humans to live and evolve, but that there is no willful creator behind it all. If we take a purely materialistic view of life on Earth, we're born, we struggle to survive and reproduce, and then we die. Anything added after that is made up by ourselves, a sense of meaning we invented to distract ourselves from the inherent meaninglessness of it all. Some people say, screw it, just embrace the absurdity of life. We're all just meat sacks floating on a rock in space. Like life is one big Rick and Morty episode. Yet we're still left with the problem that humans are naturally inclined towards supernatural belief. But hey, it could all just be a trait we evolved for the sake of self-preservation. So, I pose the question again. Why are people drawn to psychedelics? Does modern life really suck so badly that people will do anything to try and escape the despair? To find answers? For the past decade, we've heard all about the potential of psychedelics for good. What was once countercultural is now becoming part of the dominant culture. But what if I told you there was a dark side to psychedelics? Specifically, one particular substance by the name of ayahuasca. If you've been on the internet at all within the past decade, you've probably heard of ayahuasca. Ingested in the form of a tea, this brew is typically made from a mix of a vine called Banisteriopsis caapi and some other plant containing the psychedelic compound DMT. Simply put, the alkaloids from the vine allow the DMT to not get destroyed by your gut, and the effects of the drug can kick in. But I'm not primarily concerned with the science behind these compounds, but instead with the practical consequences of them. Allow me to elucidate the impetus of my investigation. A viral Twitter post by a user known as Landshark. It reads, ayahuasca is insane because it appears to be one of the most legitimately dangerous drugs with the potential to gigafry your brain, but is exclusively taken by literal turbo-normies who unironically want to heal internalized racism trauma and basically get one-shotted by it. Literally the most spiritually inept people in existence, having their little lib brains rearranged by some Mesoamerican 6D demon who makes them quit their email job, divorce their boyfriend or girlfriend, and become a traveling circus stripper or whatever. And for the sake of my investigation, I've created a practical definition of the phenomenon to help map things out. Getting one-shotted in the context of psychedelics. The phenomenon of sustaining significant long-term psychological or spiritual damage or harm to overall well-being due to consciousness-altering substances. So, are people really getting one-shotted by plants in the jungle? Let's delve in. The first step in my investigation was to collect perspectives from both schools of thought, the proponents of plant medicine and the skeptics. I'll start by going over my interview with a passionate advocate for the exploration of psychedelics, an elderly gentleman by the name of Jamie.
So the way I'm going to have this set up, the camera's going to be just at an angle.
I had my first experience with LSD when I was maybe 19. It started out really negative and then it grew into something really beautiful. So I saw the potential of that back then. Psychedelics kind of led the way for me. They were pivotal in maybe saving my life. And I think I hear that from so many people.
What would you say psychedelics mean to you?
So they tie deeply into Zen Buddhism, and my experience is tying psychedelics into meditation, because I've been meditating really since I was at early 20s. But in the meditation, the mystical states really appear very much like they do with psychedelics, because you don't have to do psychedelics to have a profound realization, sort of a Christ consciousness or Buddha mind or whatever you want to call it. But I think most religions really, at their roots, go into a mystical experience. And that's difficult to put words around it. It's an experiential thing. It's just like, what's the taste of chocolate ice cream? You can't tell anybody what the taste of chocolate ice cream is. You have to experience it. I look at so many aspects of our culture that are asleep, kind of stuck in dualism. It's life and it's death. It's good and it's bad. It's this and it's that. It's you and me. I mentioned doing nitrous oxide. So I had a tank of that from a very benevolent dentist. I think I did heroin. I did some heroin, which was kind of out of body, but I don't think I did enough. The one thing that I did do, which was really cosmic and wonderful, and it is highly addictive, was crack cocaine. I only did it once, and I saw it was just like, holy shit, this is amazingly wonderful. And I had friends that were doing it. They were addicted to it, and they would fight each other over the bong. Another big one, we mentioned ayahuasca earlier. You have the experience of launching. It's like being in a rocket ship. You lose track of your body. Time is non-existent. It's an amazing dance of maybe entities. A lot of people experience entities, and launching into just a totally different reality. Yeah, obviously I'm a proponent of them, but I say with caution, not to be taken lightly, and we still have so much to learn about them, but about even ourselves as humans. What's this all about? After you do one trip of mushrooms, it's like, oh yeah, there's something else going on here than this dualistic competitive life that we're leading.
Before getting into ayahuasca more, we need to take a moment to discuss mushrooms, specifically the magic psilocybin kind. Unlike ayahuasca, which must be meticulously prepared, or LSD, which requires complex lab conditions to produce, shrooms are fairly easy to find in nature, depending on where you live. And given how easy they are to cultivate, it's no surprise that magic mushrooms have become the most popular psychedelic today. Given their ubiquity, many assume that these mushrooms are safe, especially in comparison to the much stronger spirit vine, ayahuasca. Their banning must have just been part of the government's overreach during the war on drugs, right? Well, statistically speaking, people would be correct in assuming their general safety. I mean, it's not like people are taking enough shrooms to kill themselves, given their low toxicity. Well, let's look a little deeper, beneath the surface level of appearances, and see what these devious little fellas entail for humanity, because appearances can be deceiving. Take Robert Wasson, for example, a man whose experiences with mushrooms in Mexico were published in Life magazine, inspiring a generation to seek out the novel mushrooms. But ironically, he seemed to develop contempt for the emergent culture of psychedelic tourism. In his pivotal 1980 book, The Wondrous Mushroom, he explores the historical, cultural, and shamanic usage of these mushrooms in Mesoamerica. And in the opening pages of the book, he says, "Early man, throughout much of Eurasia and the Americas, discovered the properties of these substances and regarded them with profound respect and even awe, hedging them about with bonds of secrecy. We are now rediscovering the secret, and we should treat the entheogens with the respect to which they were richly entitled. As we undertake to explore their role in the early history of religions, we should call them by a name unvulgarized by hippie abuse. Even decades ago, the author showed a clear disdain for the Western hippies who would apparently bastardize the use of psilocybin mushrooms. Already, we see parallels to the part in the Landshark tweet about literally the most spiritually inept people taking these substances, even though magic mushrooms are distinct and generally considered to be not as intense of an experience as an ayahuasca ceremony. The author also attributes blame to the Spanish conquerors and Catholic missionaries who viewed the use of the mushrooms with great suspicion, seeing them as satanic and idolatrous. Here we see a division between the beliefs of many psychedelic users and the tenets of mainstream Christianity. That's not to say that there aren't people with overlapping beliefs, but keep this conflict in mind. Historically speaking, the schism is significant, and going back to my interview with Jamie, he also maintained a skeptical view towards organized religion, but especially Christianity and Catholicism.
There's, a book, it's called Religion with No Name, and what this writer, Brian Marescu, was trying to prove that the Eucharist was a psychedelic experience. It no longer took a priest or a bishop or a higher up male figure to bless you and tell you that you were saved or whatever, but you would have a direct experience with the divine. The way that goes, it was squelched by the Christian church. At the end of the book, he said this is an opportunity for the Catholic Church to bring back the psychedelic Eucharist. Christianity, and what we know, has been traumatic for a lot of people. There's some horrible atrocities that were just covered up. And misogyny, just when we see a female pope, then I'll say hallelujah. And when we see an apology for all the atrocities that have been done in the name of Jesus, the Crusades. Are you a Catholic as well?
I'm a Christian.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. I've been trying to learn about Eastern Orthodoxy.
We'll come back to the subject of Christianity, but let's look more into the historical use of mushrooms according to Wasson. He writes, "Wherever they are known among the Indians, the sacred mushrooms inspire awe and wonder. They are muy delicados, a word semantically akin to dangerous, and the mushrooms call for utmost care and handling. The mushroom es habla, is the word. Se ve todo, se ve donde Dios está también. You see everything. You see where God is also." It's clear that the author acknowledges the importance of intentionality, but in terms of people getting one-shotted, he does not give much credence to the notion of mushrooms causing harmful mental effects. Which begs the question, if magic mushrooms demand this level of care and attention, then what does ayahuasca, a notoriously more intense entheogen, entail? We shall see. The most intriguing portion of the book comes from a historical account of pre-colonial mushroom usage. The passage reads, "Among the friars, the Dominican Diego Duran supplies us with unique evidence of the pre-conquest use of mushrooms in his superb Historia de las Indias de Nueva España." This work was written in the 16th century and survives in the author's own manuscript. Here is a remarkable account of the history of the Aztecs, an account that no Spaniard could have assembled on his own, an intimate inside story of the rulers of Mexico Tenochtitlan, their entourage, their traditions and practices, their wars, religious beliefs, diversions, successes, and failures. We come now to the coronation of Moctezuma II in 1502, when no one in the Aztec country had yet heard of the Spaniards. For 4 days there was feasting and celebration, and then on the 4th day came the coronation, followed by human sacrifices in numbers. Then follows this paragraph, where the sacred mushrooms enter. The sacrifice finished, and the steps of the temple and patio bathed in human blood. They all went to eat raw mushrooms, on which food they all went out of their minds, worse than if they had drunk much wine, i.e. fermented drinks. So drunk and senseless were they that many killed themselves by their own hand, and with the force of those mushrooms, they would see visions and have revelations of the future, the devil speaking to them in that drunken state. Still, Wasson expresses skepticism towards the wording of the account, saying, Duran's tone here is so out of harmony with what he had previously said that, were we not dealing with the holographic manuscript in his own hand, I would ask whether we had to do with an interpolation of a priestly redactor. Such a violent statement, many men drunk and senseless, killing themselves, is repeated by white men unacquainted with the hallucinogenic mushrooms, or who have possibly been ill-prepared for the experience and been drunk from alcohol when they took them. With this information in mind, let's move on to ayahuasca. As we go through the specifics, you may notice a few fascinating patterns that seem to fit within a bigger picture. To collect information on so-called Mother Aya, I read through The Fellowship of the River, a book written by a medical doctor whose life was changed after discovering traditional plant medicine. He details his journey of becoming a shaman and tells stories of people healing their physical and mental maladies with the help of ayahuasca. Dr. Joseph Tafur writes, ayahuasca has become more and more widely known as a spiritual tool, and increasing numbers of people are flocking to the Amazon rainforest from all over the globe, seeking experiences with La Medicina, participating in what is known as ayahuasca tourism. He describes a special diet prescribed for him by a shaman in preparation for an ayahuasca ceremony. We then started La Dieta. No salt, no sugar, no red meat, no pork, no dairy, no oily food, no spicy food, no alcohol or drugs, and no sex. This was continued for the entirety of our 5-day stay. Per the tradition, the plants themselves have requested these dietary restrictions and have communicated this directly to the shamans through dreams and ayahuasca visions. It's clear that the shamans treat the plants with great respect, regarding them as intelligent beings with something to teach humanity, as opposed to mere vegetation that happens to produce mind-altering effects. Overall, the book contained compelling anecdotes of positive life changes resulting from ayahuasca ceremonies. The stories of people's anxiety, depression, or PTSD significantly improving seemed legitimate, but that didn't mean I was on board just yet. Because there's one section from the book that stood out to me, which seems to support the notion of certain people getting one-shotted. You see, it involves what is known as ego dissolution, or ego death. Within the psychedelic space, the concept of ego death refers to the phenomenon of losing your sense of self, as in, you no longer perceive a sense of separation between you and your environment, because in the moment, there is no sense of you to identify with. Sometimes you forget what your name is, where you are, or even that you're a human being. Eventually, your sense of ego comes back, or at least it's supposed to. The point is, ego death can be an intense and profound experience, and it's not hard to see how it can pose problems for certain vulnerable individuals. The relevant passage from the book reads, researchers have correlated the experience of ego dissolution to psychedelically induced changes in the brain, namely in the default mode network. Such rapid ego dissolution can be very intense and sometimes problematic. The ego serves to ground us, to help us to test reality, to plan and prevent uncertainty. If we are not well prepared, rapid ego dissolution results in magical thinking, paranoia, and delusions. Open-minded thinking is healthy, but ungrounded thinking can be dangerous. In people with a prior history of bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and/or psychotic symptoms, the use of shamanic plant medicine is not currently recommended. Such individuals are particularly vulnerable to ayahuasca's mentally destabilizing effects, and ingesting it can cause prolonged and problematic alterations in consciousness. I am aware of a few cases in which ayahuasca pushed at-risk individuals into prolonged manic and psychotic states, lasting days and even weeks. Despite attempts to calm these individuals through traditional means, psychiatric medical intervention was ultimately necessary to bring them back down to baseline. Could it be that these susceptible manic individuals are also the same ones we keep seeing online? It makes sense that people who are mentally unstable may be less apprehensive about publicly posting their delusions, thus resulting in the most negative examples also being the most prominent. But these examples are by no means restricted to public figures. You see, I combed through a handful of negative psychedelic stories from reddit.com to see if they shared anything in common. With this analysis, I'm not making the claim that psychedelics are statistically dangerous, but simply analyzing the posts to see if there are any recurring factors for the instances where psychedelic use did go horribly wrong. This way, I can try to determine the variables that may contribute to a higher likelihood of an individual getting one-shotted. As I go through these examples, I'll analyze them through the lens of my previous definition. Our first story comes from a man who inadvertently takes too much acid, which results in the worst year of his life. He describes how, after a day of working, he decides to scout the San Francisco streets for mushrooms. Instead, he runs into a hippie who offers him acid in the form of 2 orange gummies. He takes the acid, and over the next few days, keeps smoking weed to extend his high. Within this time, he manages to lose his phone, wallet, and house keys, attempts to get his eyelids tattooed, and tries to eat glass off the floor. When he finally shows up for work days later, he forgets how to talk to people. His parents are contacted, and they have him hospitalized. OP says, "For the rest of 2018, I will experience depression, derealization, depersonalization, cognitive slowing, flashbacks, HPPD, newfound levels of anxiety, a string of medications, and a deep realization that I can't talk the same, think the same, or be the same. I'm a different person." Based on this conclusion, I think it's safe to say that this unfortunate fellow got one-shotted. Another user expresses his own experience. "My trip happened over Easter weekend, 2007. Reality no longer existed for me. I could barely function for months afterward. I would sit in my office and pretend to do work. I would see signs and symbols everywhere I looked, all reminders from the universe that nothing was real. A voice constantly told me to kill myself. I'd say it took about 5 years to feel mostly real and not constantly suicidal." Many other users in the thread voice similar experiences, noting their own psychotic breaks, hospitalizations, and hearing voices. With this in mind, I read an interesting section from the book How to Change Your Mind. The author, Michael Pollan, writes, "It is also the case that people on psychedelics are liable to do stupid and dangerous things, walk out into traffic, fall from high places, and, on rare occasions, kill themselves. Bad trips are very real and can be one of the most challenging experiences of a lifetime," according to a large survey of psychedelic users asked about their experiences. But it's important to distinguish what can happen when these drugs are used in uncontrolled situations without attention to set and setting, from what happens under clinical conditions, after careful screening, and under supervision. Since the revival of sanctioned psychedelic research beginning in the 1990s, nearly 1,000 volunteers have been dosed, and not a single serious adverse event has been reported.
Can you speak to your personal experiences with any negative trips and what that signified for you?
My worst trips have been on THC, on pot. Real paranoia and depression, anxiety with psychedelics. Yeah, there would be times where it was like, oh my God, I'm in hell. I went to hell and this is the devil. I've met the devil. I mean, it was about as bad as it was hell. Somehow I lived through that. I know what hell is like, and I know what extreme depression is like. And I would say I still occasionally dance with depression, like in the middle of the night. I'll wake up from a bad dream and it's like, oh shit, I don't want to live anymore. But it goes away, almost in a laugh. So I'm learning to laugh at, in a sense, the demons and welcome them. It's like, all right, what do I have to learn from you? You're really ugly, but I'm sure I can see the beauty in you. Let's dance. Let's do it. So, and then just diving into exploring what seems like evil and seeing what I can learn from it. But the devil isn't a bad guy necessarily. If you make friends, if one's going to do psychedelics, do it with a guide. And I think they say yes, it could. In rare situations, it can trigger a psychotic episode that you may not come back from. That's extremely rare, but evidently it can happen. If psychosis runs in your family at all, they say it can be hereditary.
So, what were some of the contributing factors towards this unfortunate outcome for the original poster? The first obvious clue is the extremely high potency of the drug he took. Based on the limited information online, the orange gel acid he referred to is known to be highly potent, and seeing as he took both tabs, and the trip lasted for 3 days, it's safe to say the dosage was far too high. The higher the dosage of a psychedelic, the more unpredictable and uncontrollable the experience will be. The second, and perhaps not as obvious factor, is the copious amount of marijuana this guy was smoking. Although nowadays, many people scoff at the idea that weed could be harmful.
For most people, weed is essentially harmless.
There seems to be a sinister aspect to the substance.
Seriously, it seems like the psychedelics are like a one-shot. I've heard a lot of stories about psychedelic and even weed-induced psychosis. If you're one of these young guys, seriously, stay the fuck away from weed, THC, stay away from psychedelics, LSD, because that stuff will destroy you.
In particular, there seems to be a mental risk in combining weed with other drugs. As I was reading various anecdotes online, I noticed this issue was a recurring pattern. Many testimonies specifically cite the combination of mushrooms with cannabis as a critical factor in inducing psychosis. And if we go back to Jamie, even he had some critical words to say.
I was experimenting with other things, pot, which just didn't work. It was not even close to what psychedelics are. And it felt deadening my mind compared to mushrooms or LSD or even nitrous oxide. I had a lot of friends that were stoners and did it, but I don't know very many people who really develop a strong spiritual practice.
One final potential factor to consider for this story is that research chemicals, or analogs, are sometimes passed off as real LSD, leading to unintended consequences for the user. Though without drug testing, it's hard to say if research chemicals were involved. The next post comes from the Psychosis subreddit, in which the poster asks if anyone had experienced shroom-induced psychosis. One comment, in broken English, stood out to me. The user describes how, when he was 13 or 14 years old, he takes almost 2 grams of strong mushrooms around midnight. At 3 a.m., he wakes up screaming and moaning, and his family tries to calm him down. When the ambulance arrives, they struggle to restrain him. I was so strong, almost like I was possessed. It took 6 people to hold me down, and I broke out of the restraints 2 or 3 times. It was the most haunting experience I ever felt, like I was literally in hell. Ever since then, my life's been shit! People told me I changed, and my vibe was different, and just wasn't the same no more. Ever since then, I've felt off, and I've been trying to figure out what's wrong with me. Doing everything I can to be myself again, but can't. Always end up in self-destructive habits, and stuck right now. In this instance, this person definitely suffered long-term psychological harm from psychedelics. Another user in the thread attributes their psychosis to shrooms, but specifically says, yes, regular usage. And also, I was using weed as well. My first episode, and I do believe the shrooms unlocked this potential in my brain. In another thread about shrooms and schizophrenia, a user explains, I just want to make it clear that anyone can experience psychosis. Something as simple as stress can trigger psychosis even in people without schizophrenia. So psychedelic experiences definitely have the possibility to trigger psychosis as well. I've seen it multiple times. If you have schizophrenia or have a predisposition to it, your chances of going into psychosis will definitely be much higher. Another risk is that if you do go into psychosis and have schizophrenia, the duration of it may persist much longer than with the average person, and it may be much more difficult to snap back out of it. This notion is supported by this one systematic review that says, the adverse effects described in the present systematic review are associated with several contributing factors, and not only ayahuasca or DMT intake. Many cases involve individuals with a personal or family history of psychosis, non-psychotic bipolar disorder, or concomitant use of other drugs. This last post comes from the relationship advice subreddit. The user explains that ever since his girlfriend started experimenting with psychedelics, she has become obsessed with them. While this post is fairly unremarkable, some of the stories in the comments ring true to the Oneshot Thesis. I was in your place. We had a nice home, decent jobs, and a bright future, but it became too much for her in the end. She barely wanted to take our daughter to school. In the end, my partner left our daughter and me to go to some ayahuasca trip and never came back. She is homeless in South America and seems to have a new boyfriend every week based on her Facebook. Does that not sound strikingly similar to the line about quitting their email job, divorcing their boyfriend, and becoming a traveling circus stripper or whatever? And for our final example, it comes not from a Reddit post, but from the experience of one of the most revered figures in psychedelic culture, Terence McKenna. This passage comes from an early manuscript version of a book written by Terence's brother, Dennis. It reads, Terence's pivotal existential crisis came abruptly, sometime in 88 or 89. Everything that happened after that event was fallout. I don't know exactly when it happened, and I don't know exactly what happened. I am piecing it together from what Kat has told me, and she has volunteered few details, and I am reluctant to probe. It happened when they were living for a time on the Big Island, and it was a mushroom trip they shared that was absolutely terrifying for Terence. It was terrifying because, for some reason, the mushroom turned on him. The gentle, wise, humorous mushroom spirit that he had come to know and trust as an ally and teacher ripped back the facade to reveal an abyss of utter existential despair. Terence kept saying, so Kat told me, that it was a lack of all meaning. A lack of all meaning. And this induced panic in Terence, and probably, I speculate, a feeling he was going mad. He couldn't deal with it. Kat's efforts to reassure him were fruitless. After that experience, he never again took mushrooms, and he took other psychedelics, such as DMT and ayahuasca, only on rare occasions and with great reluctance. If such a vocal advocate underwent such a crisis, even after so much prior experience, it really goes to show how unpredictable these substances can be. There are countless negative psychedelic stories online, but going over any more of them would be redundant. Based on the online anecdotes I read, I was able to suss out a few recurring risk factors. These include, but are not limited to, chronic, repeated use of psychedelics, extremely high doses, mental vulnerability or predisposition, such as a family history involving psychosis or schizophrenia, combination of psychedelics with other drugs, especially cannabis. But this doesn't get us any closer to understanding the spiritual aspect of psychedelics, or the role of entities in all of this. So, what are the implications of encountering supernatural beings while on psychedelics? In Tafur's book, though he mentions entity encounters throughout, there was one anecdote that caught my attention. Listen as he describes a man's recollection of an ayahuasca ceremony. He was particularly impressed by his multiple experiences with extraterrestrials. These strange entities, possibly higher dimensional beings, were crucial to his healing. There, they were working on me, fixing, kind of rewiring my brain. The aliens were working on me with a computer. The alien was just reprogramming. Then he turned around and looked at me with no emotion, just to see the progress that he was making. Yet it wasn't this encounter itself that surprised me. It was the fact that it had reminded me of another post I had read months prior on a conspiracy subreddit called Escaping Prison Planet. To put it simply, it's a community of people who maintain a belief system similar to Gnosticism, where we live on a prison planet made to keep us trapped in a reincarnation cycle. That's besides the point, but what's interesting is that many of these individuals not only believe that the entities encountered on psychedelic trips are real, but that they are not to be trusted. For instance, we have this post titled, Mantis Beings Harvest Woman's DNA During Ayahuasca Ceremony. Included is a screenshot of a woman's Facebook comment, which I'll paraphrase. During an Aya ceremony, I had an alien thing on my face, and a spike went through my head. I was laid down while 4 stick insect-like beings operated on me, but I couldn't really feel anything, and felt really calm. Years later, I was at a mind-body spirit festival, and a psychic ran up to me, He told me he had a vision of a spike going through my head and was told to tell me that I had my DNA harvested. This certainly provides a different interpretation than the one of healing from the anecdote in Tafur's book, but the themes of operation sound strikingly similar, don't they? These mantid entities are just one of the many people may encounter on psychedelic trips, and there's even a subreddit dedicated to documenting their activities. What's strange is that multiple people, independent of each other, report similar phenomena of these entities operating on their brains. I know this is beginning to sound absolutely schizophrenic, and believe me, I understand, but part of me was intrigued to keep searching. There was just some unnerving feeling I got from all of this, which I just couldn't shake. This begs the question, assuming that these entities are real, could some of them be demonic? Before looking into the final book, which focuses on just that question, I'll pivot back to my interview with Jamie to see what he had to say about the entities he'd encountered.
But ayahuasca, have you done ayahuasca? You have?
Yeah. Everything is fractals, and for me, when I did it, it was just like, wow, this is like the best acid trip ever. After like an hour or so of that, the shaman says, okay, does anybody want to go for round number 2? But he asked me this time, he said, do you want a light dose or a heavy dose? And I'm bravado, Mr. Bravado here, so yeah, give me a good dose. So that blew me away. I got really sick to my stomach, and I was like, in a way, I fought that, and then I started seeing demons, and it was like, oh my God, I can't wait for this to be over. When's it going to be over? And they were all kind of beckoning me to come with them, and I'm like, not happening. And I went into one of my chakras, which is the classical third eye, and there was kind of like a refuge there. My third eye just lit up. And it was like, come, you can rest here.
You said when you took ayahuasca, you saw demons. And earlier we talked about how people see entities and how some people believe they are distinct, real spiritual entities. What are your beliefs when it comes to that, and how would you interpret what you saw during your ayahuasca trip?
Great question. I didn't analyze too much what I saw. There were many of them, some of them were, they were like little gnomes in a way, and they weren't really entities. They were in a sense, but to me, an entity is what I experienced doing DMT, where it was absolutely, I'm launched into outer space, and I know other people in lab settings, almost everybody does see entities, if you do enough of it.
As a side note, his mention of gnomes piqued my interest.
They were like little gnomes in a way.
I recalled reading about similar entities in a weird Gnostic book called Can You Stand the Truth?, in which they're referred to as elementals. It reads, "The elementals have energy forms as bodies and are not strictly physical or material in the common expression of the term, even though energy is also material and its results are evident on a daily basis. All these energy beings have the sole purpose of weaving, maintaining, transmuting, and reconstructing matter like good and obedient workers of nature in its entirety. These beings can be perceived by sensitive people easily, because the plane they dwell in is adjacent to the densely material one. At the early stages of man's creation, at that turning point when Australopithecus was slowly being transformed into Homo, man, these microscopic creatures of the etheric plane taught the first men the secrets of nature, as well as the properties of plants and herbs. A great portion of this knowledge did not come through observation of nature alone, but also through the suggestions of qualified elementals to the juvenile mankind. Old stories say that the worlds of men and gnomes were once one and undivided, but something happened to divide it in two, and since then, each party has lived in their own separate part of the world. Once more, we're faced with the unsettling implication that these psychedelic experiences are not merely hallucinations, but potentially some sort of tearing of the veil, an opening of perception that allows people to witness intelligent beings that would otherwise be hidden. But why would they be hidden in the first place? By now, a lot of people are familiar with the idea of machine elves, and many psychonauts claim that they are beings of love and joy. But are they really to be trusted?
The world melted and we saw elves that were also machines, but also orbs of light. I said, I think we're both dead. They bounced within us and back out of us, and here's what they said. We're glad you're here. Come and stay a while. You can make shapes and objects with your sounds, transmissions from a smile.
I should also note that not everyone who takes psychedelics sees entities. These encounters are mostly associated with higher doses and more intense substances like ayahuasca or DMT. Psychedelic experiences in general can vary by an extreme margin depending on individual disposition, dosing, and environment. For some, what is a life-changing spiritual experience is, for others, just a few hours of distorted visuals with no spiritual significance. So, are these entities real, distinct beings, or just hallucinatory manifestations of the collective unconscious? I'll let you keep watching, and you can come to your own conclusions. By far, the most shocking book I came across during my research was The Return of the Dragon by Louis Ungit. Ungit writes, while some of the things people see while on DMT can be considered culturally conditioned, the surprising finding in studies of the drug is that many experiences are common across all cultures. As University of Greenwich's David Luke says, there are uncanny commonalities at the core of experiences emanating from old folkloric accounts of fairies, anthropological and indeed first-hand accounts from indigenous cultures, as well as from FDA-approved experimental research, so-called recreational, and maybe even biblical DMT trip reports, and even alien abduction cases. Sometimes people on hallucinogens report that sober people around them can see or hear phenomena they witness while tripping. One DMT user reported that while on the drug, he saw a harlequinesque entity, and then the next day, his perfectly sober roommate woke him up screaming about seeing a similar entity in her bedroom. Ungit presents a very interesting argument on how these entities may be understood from a Christian perspective. Contrary to popular opinion, Christianity does not completely reject the lower gods of paganism. There is a place for lower godlike beings within the Bible. The Old Testament at times sounds like it is polytheistic. It speaks of the God of Israel as God of gods. It speaks of him judging other gods. It speaks of him being above other gods. The picture painted in the Bible and in the writings of the early Christians is that the gods of the pagans exist, but represent spirits and demons, not the true God or the omnipresent creator God. This is stated most explicitly in St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. Do I mean then that a sacrifice offered to an idol is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, but the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God, and I do not want you to be participants with demons. In the book, the author goes into much more detail by revealing a shocking connection between drugs, ancient spiritual practices, and human sacrifice, including infanticide. The point is, we know that historically, human sacrifice was common in certain regions of the world during certain times, and many of the same people who practiced human sacrifice also used drugs for religious purposes, sometimes in tandem. But nobody actually believes in Mesoamerican entities, right? Ancient people probably just imagined those gods and myths to try to explain the world around them, right? Wrong. Page 76 reads, in ancient Mesoamerica, the Maya built beautiful buildings, henges to track the stars, in an amazing empire. They also used various drugs, including mushrooms, to talk to the gods, one of whom was Kukulkan, a feathered serpent god. Sadly, the Maya also enslaved millions, engaged in constant war, and drowned little children in sinkholes to appease their gods. The Aztecs worshipped Quetzalcoatl, whose name means precious serpent, and who is described as the feathered serpent who came to teach the ancient inhabitants of Mexico the benefits of settled agriculture and the skills necessary to build temples. From Quetzalcoatl and other gods, They learned all sorts of great things about healing, astronomy, and technology, and their shamans used mushrooms and other hallucinogens to experience the spirit world. Like the Maya, the Aztecs also engaged in widespread slavery, widespread oppression, and war, and they practiced human sacrifice. The rates at which they murdered are legendary. Some scholars put the number of people sacrificed by the Aztecs as high as 250,000 per year. Whoa, dark stuff. But now, let's take a look at my second interview with none other than the author and YouTuber UnderstandingConspiracy.
My name's Paul Stobbs, and I'm the author of the book The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns. And I predominantly come at all my work from the Christian contrarian perspective. So I don't believe entities that people see when taking things like entheogens are reflections of the collective unconscious from like a Jungian archetypical perspective. I don't believe the hallucinations. I believe you go to a very tangible, real place, but we don't perceive it naturally. And when we take drugs, all we do is widen our perception enough to perceive this other side of the coin of reality. But I believe the entities that people encounter there are very real entities that have a very biblically historical reason for being there, and a whole story which is covered in that book of how they got there and how they're not our friends. The biblical narrative is not really something many people know about. When it gets to like the pre-flood world, we don't really know what civilization was like in these ancient times. And we have this talk of a time where there was a flood, you know, and everything was reset in a very hard, literal sense. And no one really knows much about that if you haven't really come from a biblical angle. And even most Christians don't really know much about that time, because you find that story is fleshed out more so in books like the Book of Enoch, for example, or the Book of Giants, or these extra biblical pseudepigraphical texts, which aren't necessarily part of the 66 book canon, which we are told we're supposed to stick to today in like modern mainstream churchianity. But people like myself, who are crazy conspiracy theorists out there, are willing to look and read anything, or reading these books, it's like, oh, well, that explains everything. Now, passages in Genesis 6, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men and bore giants for offspring, which became mighty men of renown. That's just one sentence, and then it moves on to talk about Noah and the flood. And it's kind of, hang on, what was that? And you find out the reason Genesis isn't concerned with explaining that to you is because there are already tomes written about that time, which it's assumed the reader and the writer of the time knew the audience would know about. There's no need to go into that. You all already know about the giants of the antediluvian past, right? This book is just about genealogies, you know? So if you go to something like the Book of Giants or the Book of Enoch, it tells you what happened. And it says quite literally, beings came from heaven who were tasked by God to watch over us and look after us. They decided to instead corrupt mankind's creation by having sex with human women and creating abominable hybrid monsters that became giants. We know monsters were created, they were killed, and it makes it explicitly clear their spirits are stuck on earth, wandering around, looking for bodies to inhabit. And that's where demons come from. That's where they come from. After the flood of Noah, God put a rainbow in the sky as a sign to Noah, a covenant to Noah, that he would never flood the earth ever again, a promise. But wait a minute, so does that mean rainbows didn't exist prior to the flood? Well, it can only make sense when you start to contemplate what it means to see a rainbow. The spectrum of a rainbow, the 7 colors that we know of, are our limited bandwidth of visual perception. That's what we can see. We can only see within that range, and that's actually a very narrow range of what's actually available and all around us, but we don't see that. And it seems like before the flood, we could. And now all we see is the rainbow, the limited perception. And I think that was a mercy by God to limit our perceptions, because if he didn't do that, the corruption would continue after the flood, because we're still seeing and conversing with the monsters that are everywhere, the offspring of these watchers. These things weren't just created for fun. They were created through a specific rebellion with the sole intention to usurp the kingdoms of the earth and corrupt humanity in God's creation. Again, this narrative I've kind of just weed for you there, that explains what these entities are on the other side of the veil and why we can't perceive them. And it's just not really known by most people, especially the psychedelic community. And you can go outside of the biblical canon, because to you that sounds just a bit too much, and then just look at all the cultures around the earth. Every single corner of the earth, it doesn't matter where you go, they encountered these giants, these offspring of dragons. Every culture has the same story, and they represent them everywhere. In stone, art, tapestries, in their own costumes they use to channel them, and they look like clowns, actually. White skin, big serpentine, wide grinning, big red-lipped mouths, bulging massive eyes, wild crazy colored hair, multicolored patterns all over this white layered skin, like a serpent. And by any stretch of the imagination, they look like clowns from our perspective. And the clown costume is a representation of these creatures.
So here's the Heyoka tribe and what their jesters would have looked like. Black and white striped, horned monsters. And the thing I saw is here. Is the same as this Heyoka tribe jester everyone sees, and the same as the Pueblo clown in this tribe.
Circuses became a thing. The clown was adopted into the circus, and the original circuses were created by Freemasons. And these Freemasons, who have this background and this belief and veneration of demons, created something called a circus and gets the public involved in the ritual. And circuses were a big deal back then. If the circus came to town, you went. What else were you gonna do? The circus itself is kind of like a psychedelic place, full of fractal patterns and designs and spinning light wheels and carousels and all this, and there's flashing lights everywhere. I think it is a tongue-in-cheek representation of this DMT realm where the clowns reside, where the jesters reside, where the demons are. They're trying to create physical representations of spiritual concepts because that opens up channels, it opens up portals, it gives the demons the ability to manifest here physically through the channels that are created. An entire environment like a circus, which would then manifest that spiritual concept into the physical. I'm trying to say is when people see jesters in the DMT realm, what they're seeing are the disembodied spirits of these half dragon, half human giant hybrids. And when you suddenly can see them, they'll tell you anything they know you will believe. So they'll call themselves ascended masters here to help mankind ascend to the fifth dimension or something. They'll say whatever you want to hear because they know you'll believe it, to guide you away from God and corrupt you even more and make you your own God in your own mind. That is the ultimate goal. That was the very first thing the serpent did to Adam and Eve. Bite the apple and ye will be as gods, knowing good and evil. When you take psychedelics, you go back to the center of the source where all life emanates from, and you feel that oneness with all things. And it's kind of, there actually is some truth to that feeling. It's because we are made in the image of God, but we are not God. And that's where the lie kind of seeps in. That's the delusion, the illusion. And I did these things quite a lot myself. So I know these feelings. I know these perspectives. I'm not just coming at this from a ignorant, backwards Christian perspective who doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, no, I wasn't a Christian prior to. I've lived a long life of being the opposite, heavy psychedelic exploration in my early 20s, like heavy, every day microdosing LSD, getting the hardest drugs, salvia, and also taking DMT crystalline form quite a few times, and I was expecting mushrooms, you name it, I've done it. I was going hard into the psychedelic realms to figure out what it is, and it only ever proved to me that, there is a spirit realm. There are creatures there. They lie, and God is real, and I am not God. I eventually got to that conclusion. I'm not trying to offend people who are in the psychedelic community, but there's a serious problem of narcissism. They really do start to get like a messiah complex, and they think they're special. It's like this, I'm better than everybody else because I've lost my ego. And there's nothing more egotistical than saying you've lost your ego. It's not useful. It certainly doesn't make your life better. And that's another reason why I ended up coming to God. It's like, no matter how much I kind of explored these realms and how much knowledge I thought I was learning and how my perspectives and consciousness was expanding, my life tangibly was getting worse. And it was only after I gave all that kind of stuff up and stopped smoking cannabis as well and the rest of it and gave myself over to God that I actually see a real tangible improvements in my life. Again, I say to anybody who's deep and heavily into psychedelic use, it's like really take stock of where you actually are. And if you're being intellectually honest with yourself, you're not living up to your potential. You're wasting your time while you're here in the physical world because you have your eyes on the spiritual realm thinking that's the goal. That's not the goal. That place is a place. Sure, it's impressive, yes, but it's not where you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be here living your life right now, embodied in the physical realm. The demons they're interacting with, who they think are super advanced beings who have transcended the physical realm or something. The irony is, no. They are desperate to be where you are. They want their bodies back, and they'll use your body if you let them in. But all the while, them having this jealousy and this rage towards you, they're soothsaying you with these fancy lies to make you convinced that your flesh is a prison. Your flesh is a trap. You need to get out of this thing.
Gnosticism.
This is what I mean, yeah. They don't want to be where they are. It's described by Jesus in the Bible, when an unclean spirit is cast out of a man, he wanders in dry places. He hungers and he thirsts, but he can find no means to quench these desires because he hasn't got a body to drink with or anything to experience anything with. We're lucky when we take something like DMT. We get to come back after 10 minutes. They don't. Now, I know it's fun when you're there for those 10 minutes because you just think for a second and imagine what it's like to be there for an eternity. It's hell, and they hate you for your privilege. I would say wandering around in the DMT realm, ignorant, is like wandering around in no man's land outside of your trench with no weapons and no armor. Like, you are just open to anything.
Do you have any theories about why psychedelics even exist in the first place? Like, how did they get here and why do they have the effects they do? Because that's a huge mystery to me.
I think the question's loaded. It's the idea like they were put there for us to find kind of attitude. And it's kind of, look, chemical reactions happen all the time. Just because we as humans have discovered that putting one thing with another thing and then ingesting that thing will cause X, Y, and Z to happen isn't special. And there's nothing inherently evil with that either. I'm not saying it's wrong to take psychedelics. We need the wiring of the universe. We need the code that projects this place. We need the pipes behind the walls to make the house, the realm we live in, function. And that's his purpose. Are you an interdimensional plumber? Do you need to be going around messing around with the pipework of the universe? I don't think you really do, What I'm saying is, it's now a war zone, and if you're ignorant, you're in trouble. If you want to go to how did we discover these things, well, it seems like we did have help. Others will tell you, the plants told us. They spoke to us and told us what to do, because it's a mystery. How did they know to put these two things together in this very complex and specific way? If you go to the Book of Enoch, it makes it clear that the angels who came down to humanity didn't just mix themselves with humans and create monsters. They taught humanity things to basically play God. So they taught them weaponry. They taught them the art of antimony, which is makeup. But people think it's a sexual thing, how to deceive people and how to attract males. But I think the use of makeup actually was a tool used to channel spirits. By mirroring something in the spirit realm through makeup and dress, you in turn are allowing that thing to cross over into the physical realm through your body. And that's kind of a known occult practice among these tribes I mentioned in my book. But another thing that was taught was pharmakia, the mixing of roots to have specific outcomes to help aid in talking to, communing with, and channeling with the spirits, a method of staying in touch with them. It's possibly nefarious reasons why we know these things, but again, they're not special. And yes, sacrifice was a big part of the religion of the giants and the gods. These giants ate people. When mankind ran out of grain and couldn't sustain the giants anymore because they just kept growing, the giants started to eat the animals, then started to eat the people, and then even started to eat each other. The hunger was insatiable, So to appease the giant clown god, you give it something to eat, hoping it wouldn't eat you in the process. And that's where the idea of sacrificing your children came to. And in a way, what happens during these channeling rituals, they sacrifice somebody or even eat the flesh themselves. What they're trying to do is appease the spirits of these entities who used to drink that blood when they were physical. They get a way for them to experience that blood, and that pleases the gods, and then it's a transaction. It's kind of, okay, well, you did that for me, I'll give you something back, so you keep doing it. And what it usually entails is power. I want my men to be cut and not bleed, or I want to be able to be as fast as an elk. In these earlier tribes, it would have been that simple. And in Africa, that's still happening. They still do these type of things in many tribes, And there's many ways they can do that. Basically, let me into your body, and so long as my spirit is in your body, you can't bleed. Even the music industry played the same game, You let me in your body, and you drink blood and kill people and do things for me while I'm in your body, and I get to feel that and taste that and experience that and smell that and see it and feel it, I'll make you famous. I'll make it seem like you can play the guitar, it's that type of stuff. And these are tales as old as time itself. I think just sacrifice is just a method of proving to the demon that, first of all, you're on their side. And you're not going to call on Jesus at any time to cast it out. If you've sacrificed a child, the demon can feel pretty comfortable turning up. In the West, we are coming at it from a very ignorant position. Not only do we not believe in demons, we don't even believe in the spiritual realm. We don't even believe that God exists or any of that's real. So from that foundational belief, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. You're a fool, and you'll be taken for one. And that's why they give you the middle finger, like Joe Rogan said.
One of the last ones, more profound ones, was a bunch of jesters that were all giving me the finger.
Really?
They were all circling around me like, give me the finger.
They're like, who named you?
I always feel like it's lessons.
They're laughing at you, because they are laughing at you. They really are. If you ever are a psychedelic trip and you're stuck in these situations, call on Christ and see what happens. Don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt for a second that it's not going to work for you because you're not a believer. It will work. It doesn't matter. These things flee in his name. There's power in his name alone.
To better understand the role of the demonic in the psychedelic realm, what better source than from a thoroughly experienced psychonaut who claims to know the true roles of these entities? Because the final piece of the puzzle comes from DMT Nexus, a forum about DMT and other entheogens. So take a listen to what I'm about to read. Believe it or don't. But personally, I found the discussion to be rather foreboding, considering it took place in 2013, long before the Oneshot Thesis started going mainstream. The heading reads, How to Combat Malevolent Entities in Hyperspace. The poster, 5-Dimensional Nick, writes, Dear Forumers, I wonder if anyone can offer any advice. My fiancé has had some experience with DMT, from the beautiful to the very unpleasant. Commonly, she feels the DMT entities are advising her strongly not to take it anymore. On one trip, she was shown a million ways of how to kill herself and goaded to do so by a tall, dark, cloaked figure. Recently, she has also had the same trip with malevolent entities, showing her this again. She and I are wondering if anyone has advice on how to break this cycle and/or ward off these malevolent hyperspacers. Thanks, 5-Dimensional Nick. While several users offer suggestions, others bring up their own beliefs regarding the disturbing realities of these entities. Hyperspace Fool says, My take is rather controversial, but I think that hyperspace entities are objectively real, and that some of them are bad. The bad ones tend to be rather weak compared to the light beings and higher types, but plenty strong to soul rape you, abduct you to an oppressive place, and spend half an eternity torturing you, or simply feed parasitically on you. The single biggest factor here is negative emotions. The standard dark entity seems to feed on one or more of these. Fear seems to be the biggest one, but anger, sadness, guilt, etc. all have buggers that feed on them. If such experiences were just time-dilated expanses of odd and bizarrely cruel mistreatment that evaporated as the drug wore off, they would be disturbing enough. But it is not the case, sadly. Some of these things can hitch a ride back with you, hiding in one of your own bodies, often physical, astral, mental, etc. You can have such passengers with you for a very long time, sabotaging you at every turn, making you miserable and draining your energy. All I can say is this is not a hobby for the faint of heart. At some point, the extreme airy-fairy New Age vibe, as well as the extreme materialist denial vibe, can both come back to bite you in the ass. These things are not fantasies, and they have real consequences. Then another user, who happens to be a Russian Orthodox Christian, offers an interesting piece of wisdom to the original poster. The only thing that seemed to work in such situations was the help from a very powerful light ally. In my personal case, it was Jesus Christ who saved my ass. To be honest, I can't think of anybody else who could do the trick, but that's just my opinion. Peace and good luck. Later in the thread, we see the return of Hyperspace Fool, who writes at length, I usually don't want to get into too much detail about this stuff, intended to avoid mention of the malevolent entities altogether, as I don't want to plant suggestions for people or influence anyone to have such experiences because they read about them in one of my posts. However, since there have been so many threads like this cropping up, and so many trip reports with these kinds of experiences, and I have had a ton of my friends and colleagues specifically come to me with these experiences of late, I feel obligated to let people know what I have seen in over 35 years of heavy and regular entheogen usage, including long stints of hanging out with mescaleros, ayahuasqueros, and even some brujos. So, to answer your questions, in my experience, 1. There are entities that are orders of magnitude more gnarly than the ones that scare people shitless. Not just run-of-the-mill demons, hostile aliens, parasites, and the like that you hear about regularly, but archfiends, demon princes, and other often vicious alien things that are not only malevolent, but incredibly powerful and of an intelligence that dwarfs all human genius combined into insignificance. Beings of this sort are dangerous enough here, while you are in your normal consensual reality. When you venture into their home turf, they can make mincemeat of even very experienced psychonauts. Read through the myths, legends, and religious works, and you will find a plethora of references to things like Beelzebub, Ravana, Mephistopheles, Taraka, Kali, Tiamat, Azazel, Cthulhu. 2. I've had dark entities follow me home, set traps for me, attempt to destroy me, and even hide inside of me for long periods of time unknown to me, while they sabotaged me and sucked energy from me. And this is despite the fact that I have a lot of experience dealing with them, and can handle legions of the lesser sort with ease on my own. And I have a good deal of very heavy angelic beings who protect and aid me. But even still, my experiences pale compared to those I have witnessed in other people. I have seen people get possessed and start going all exorcist in front of me. I've seen people snap and never come back again, ending up in mental hospitals or committing suicide to drive out the evil voices in their heads. I've seen people manifest spontaneous wounds or contract illnesses, and I have seen people become evil and murderous, doing incredible harm to themselves and others. Whatever you personally believe or are in favor of believing, there is a reason why it is fairly universal for cultures worldwide, with no previous contact with each other, to have witch doctors, exorcists, and shaman who specialize in healing the possessed or other such professional demon banishers. This is what Jesus and the apostles were doing when they went around casting out devils and demons. This stuff is in Islam, Zoroastrianism, Tibetan Buddhism, Hinduism, Shintoism, and nearly every Native American religion I have ever seen. It is in Wicca, in the Celtic religion, Viking and Teutonic beliefs, Zulu, Igbo, Bwiti, and every other African culture I know of. There is nowhere and no when on this globe you can go where people are not aware of these beings and have not developed very pointed methods of dealing with them. Often this involved placating these beings or serving them. Many of the beings worshipped in Babylonian, Aztec, and latter-day Mayan cultures, for instance, were hoary demons who wanted blood sacrifice. If you don't believe me, go find a ruin that hasn't been cleared of its resident evils and smoke some changa there. Better yet, don't. I have done a variety of entheogens at such ruins and ancient sites of mass murder, and let me tell you, it is no joke. The threats that some of these beings make are far from empty. It is not theater to them. They have nothing to gain from posturing and posing for you. Beings that engage in that sort of thing are third-rate charlatans or minor demons at best. If you haven't encountered any of the beings that are the real deal, be grateful. Be happy they have not taken an interest in you. Of course, most people are not even aware of it, even when they are regularly victimized by such creatures. They can easily cause you to forget or never even experience them directly. People often come out of their possessed trances and remember absolutely nothing, and are very shocked to see people standing around them, wide-eyed and terrified. Considering that most trippers I have met remember only a handful of events from their journeys, despite the fact that time can be so dilated that you can spend literal eternities in these spaces, tells me that it is quite possible that people would not recall having ever met some of these guys. So, my friend, believe what you will, but I warn you, if you are wrong, the costs are not always just a bad trip. A thread by a different user on the forum also comes to the same conclusion. This psychonaut says, "Nothing in hyperspace is as it seems. Blindly trusting anything out there is an incredible risk that carries serious consequences. Although this user's initial experiences with DMT felt positive, the entities which he befriended eventually turned on him. These beings first promised him gifts and psychic abilities, but when he refused to submit to their ever-increasing demands, they became openly hostile. He provides some examples of the entity's demands. 1. The need to empty yourself, similar to Buddhist teachings, but their version of this involved leaving yourself in an incredibly vulnerable state and completely at their mercy. 2. Universal interconnectedness. We are one. You are me and I am you, etc. Again, partly true, but their version of this emphasized blind trust in them since we were, after all part of the same thing. 3. Ascension to higher forms of existence. You shall be as gods, etc. At the end of the post, he writes, I strongly suspect that whatever it was that I encountered has been around for a very long time, playing the exact same game across human history and the history of other non-human intelligent life, based on striking parallels I can draw to my own experiences. It seems obvious to me that they have left their mark on human culture in the form of all kinds of religious, mythological, and occult portrayals, sometimes vilified, sometimes glorified, with varying degrees of accuracy, and of course muddled with all manner of flawed human interpretation. Many works of fiction also seem to contain embellished, or even dumbed down, elements inspired by either direct or second-hand contact with them, including the likes of H.P. Lovecraft, Lord Dunsany, and Edgar Allan Poe. There's no need to mince words. These things are absolutely demonic. I really don't like that term because of all its associated baggage, but that is the best way I can think of to describe these beings and their true nature. This leads me to the part most of you are probably going to like the least, so I'll keep it brief. This is based on my own limited experience and perspective, so I'm not making any kind of authoritative assertion here, but I'm leaving this here as food for thought for any of you who might be experiencing these things. In all their attempts to portray themselves as divine, I think that they may have been imitating something real, and they have a violent aversion to the real thing, whatever that may be. Through a bizarre series of serendipitous events following my confrontation with them, I discovered that they really hate certain divine symbology, scripture, so-called holy places, and other resources. I'm not quite sure how to interpret this, but I am fairly confident that this reaction is genuine and not part of the deception. They pretended to be indifferent at first, even supportive of these things, but I can now clearly sense their reaction to these things, ranging from mild but obvious discomfort to injured pride to outright disgust and revulsion. When pressed for an explanation, they attempted a rather amusing excuse for this, but I'm going to refrain from going into more detail on this subject to avoid sounding like I'm pushing some sort of religious propaganda. Coming from the perspective of being a materialist/secular humanist prior to these experiences, my own ideas on the subject of divinity are very incomplete, and I don't want to present any incorrect or misleading information as fact. And thus, we conclude this section. Take it as you will. I like psychedelic art, sometimes, and I think psychedelic culture can be pretty interesting. But I also think it's the case that culturally, we take certain ideas for granted, when perhaps we should be more skeptical of the origins of these movements. Though people of a more naturalistic mindset may say that we shouldn't over-spiritualize things, I think it's the opposite, that we may be at risk of under-spiritualizing things. Maybe after listening to everything I said, you don't agree with any of it. Perhaps you feel you've positively changed or grown because of insights you gained from psychedelic experiences. For every bad trip report online, there are dozens of people who report the opposite, of the beauty of life being revealed to them, or realizing how they can be better people to others, or tearing down old maladaptive thinking patterns. I believe these realizations are not only possible, but common on such trips. However, these viewpoints are heavily colored by the awe of experiencing otherworldly wonders. Just because something is shiny and impressive doesn't mean that it is to be trusted. Just because people have benefited from psychedelics doesn't mean that spiritual dangers don't exist. As Paul said, it's like playing with fire.
Do you think that there can be a legitimate medical role that these substances can play, or is it better to avoid them altogether?
You play with fire because look, it's a profound experience to realize there is a spiritual realm, and that can be helpful to a lot of people who are stuck in a dark hole to know that. If you need the proof, the drugs will give you that. The problem is kind of what you really need and what you really got a taste of was a relationship with God, but you didn't know it. I'd say go full hog, go for the real thing, ask and you'll receive, get to know him, and you'll fulfill that hole, that thing, that darkness that's holding you back and keeping you depressed. But you haven't got a relationship with him yet. You're not there. You'll relapse. You're not going to go. It's not a lasting cure to your problem. Your problem is you need a relationship back with the Father. And that's kind of my answer to that.
Believe it or not, I didn't set out to make this documentary with the intention of proving that psychedelics are bad or evil. I wanted to explore both sides of the issue, as my own opinion on the topic has shifted significantly over the last few years. And after going through both the pro and anti-psychedelic viewpoints, I can confidently say that I will be viewing them with great caution going forward.
I think there's one more thing we can touch upon. I can read it out.
Yeah, read it out.
Okay, so this is from Landshark, Twitter user. He says, ayahuasca is insane because it appears to be one of the most legitimately dangerous drugs with the potential to gigafry your brain, but is exclusively taken by literal turbo normies who unironically want to heal internalized racism trauma and basically get one-shotted by it. Literally the most spiritually inept people in existence, having their little lib brains rearranged by some Mesoamerican 6D demon who makes them quit their email job, divorce their boyfriend or girlfriend, and become a traveling circus stripper or whatever. So that's the post.
Yeah. My take on that, each to his own, that is pretty indicative of somebody who is not happy in their own life and yet not wanting anybody else to be happy. If I'm going to suffer, I want you to suffer, I'm going to trash everything that you're doing. Yeah, I used to trash people that were spiritual, and this is probably when I was a teenager. Yeah, I had my opinions back then. I hate to say I was almost a neo-Nazi as a teenager. I grew up in a really conservative community that colored my attitude and thought Hitler was a good guy, and it's like, whoa. So I would say to me, it just is like, this man is very inexperienced. He's got a lot of work to do. Because I know peace, I know love, I know joy, I know harmony, and no regrets whatsoever about that, the practice. Don't take my word on anything of that. I mean, I share my experience genuinely. I'm not trying to say anybody has to do psychedelics. That's just been my experience. But I think diving into deeper states of consciousness than we're taught in public school or Sunday school, never give up the exploration. It just like they say, just layers of the onion. You just keep peeling off one layer of the onion skin after another. It always feels like there's another layer to peel back. And for me at 77, hell yes, I'm still exploring and peeling back those things. But how amazingly gratifying it is to be on that path, be opened up to just exploration about life. So there.
I do have a tweet to bring up, and I just wanted to see if you're aware of this. Have you heard of the Landshark ayahuasca tweet?
No. Enlighten me.
He says, so that was the famous tweet that sort of spurred this exploration. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's definitely a big community of liberal, cringy weirdos online who are like I said, have got that whole, well, I've lost my ego now, I'm going to go off and live a bohemian nomadic lifestyle somewhere in Bali, you know what I mean, and Instagram it every other day. It's kind of, people don't have ideas have people. It's quite a secular way of explaining this. And in a way, a lot of people's belief systems and their worldviews and ideologies are not their own. It was given to them by these entities in this other realm through one way or another. So yeah, dangerous times. I'm not surprised you're doing this documentary because, yeah, the zeitgeist is awash right now with this worldview. And I also think younger generations like Gen Z and maybe Gen Alpha are going to be the most conservative, orthodox Christian generation to be around in a long time too. They seem to go in the complete opposite direction in protest against these absolute cringe mongers on Instagram. So who knows? Who knows? God works in mysterious ways. Let's keep the faith and stay positive. No fear.
All right, guys, we're here in Oceanside, California, and I'm going to go around asking people questions about ayahuasca. I have a feeling we're going to run into the right sort of people to interview.
Oh yeah, I'll talk about ayahuasca. What's up?
What's up, dude? How's it going?
Good.
When you think of ayahuasca, what comes to mind?
Grandmother. Ayahuasca is a technology. It's a grandmother spirit from the vine. The vine goes all the way deep into the womb of Mother Earth. And grandmother's ancient, and she knows the ways, she knows how nature is, and she can remind us of that. So it brings us back to nature. She reminds me that I am enough here and now as I come. But it's not a solution for everybody either. It depends on your mental state, because it could also exacerbate. It could increase, an experience that maybe somebody schizophrenic type experiences,
Absolutely.
So you got to get your mind checked before going into a very powerful experience. And who's facilitating and what's the setting. I think it's really important to be very clear on what it is you're seeking. Are you seeking escape? Or are you seeking to go deeper, to understand yourself more?
Do you think there can be an overlap between this sort of plant medicine and something like Christianity?
Absolutely. In fact, the original sacrament, I want to be careful with how I say this. There has been plenty of research that has shown that the Dead Sea Scrolls have had information about working with psilocybin and other forms of psychedelic plant medicine as a sacrament. So that's what I do in my own private ministry. I have a private ministry, and we're legally allowed to work with these medicines because it is a sacrament. So that the original sacrament, if we're talking about Catholicism, Christianity, well, the fruit, the mushroom, that is the true blood and body of Christ. Christ is consciousness. It's not one being. So these things can be very powerful. They can crack somebody open, and they have mystical experiences, out-of-body experiences, but that if they're not prepared, they don't have a solid foundation in their life already in a way, if they're not grounded, it can really disrupt your life. So be cautious of that. Be conscientious of that. Giga fry your brain, but it's exclusively taking my literal turbo normies who unironically want to heal internalized race. Basically get one-shotted by it. Lib brains. Oh, well, I can tell you right now that the person that wrote this is projecting very heavily. So this is what I'm talking about, unintegrated shadow. Taking something and demonizing it. These are projections. Do I agree? Yeah, there's plenty of people out there that are living certain lifestyles, that are overusing medicine. Fine. There's a lot of people using it intentionally and healing with it. And again, it's not for everybody. So, that particular individual, honestly, from just looking at that as well, that wasn't even his own personal Instagram. So that's another thing. It's another part of shadows. People will say these things and talk about these things, and they won't do it with their face. They won't do it with their own actual being. It's another weird way that the shadow can come out and start expressing itself and projecting. And because we're shunning that part of ourselves. It's like, oh no, that I don't want that. That's bad. There's no such thing as good and bad. It's a human thing to place these values.
I've seen kind of a light and shadow side to it, from what I've heard. Some people can use it as a powerful tool of transformation, but if you're having massive ayahuasca journeys on a pretty regular basis, it there can also be a lack of integration too. So I think with anything, it's just using it really responsibly, and if you're gonna do that work, let it really properly integrate and then kind of implement into your life before kind of journeying again and again.
You don't know anyone who's done ayahuasca?
No, actually, I lie. I do know one person who actually is in a program and that swears that it helped her overcome not only her depression, but her anxiety. And also it cured her addiction to other things.
Right, I've heard that as well.
To be honest with you, I get more spiritual experiences sober than I do in any kind of unnatural, experience. If you're a good person, man, good things come to you.
Have you heard of ayahuasca?
What the fuck is that? Okay, I don't even know what the fuck that shit is. I never heard about it, dude.
Have you heard about ayahuasca?
No.
It's a hallucinogen that
You made that?
I made the sign. I didn't.
You did?
I didn't make ayahuasca.
I had never heard of this.
It is a hallucinogen. It's like a psychedelic drug people take in the jungle to have these.
Oh, where can I get it?
Wait, what the actual fuck was that? Rewind the tape.
Hey, Necro, we'll see it.
This seems like a fucking DMT jester conspiracy to me.
Yeah, everybody needs psychedelics in their life.
What's your favorite psychedelic?
I'm probably looking at the rainbow.
The rainbow?
Yeah, the rainbow, because it has all the colors. So I'm the real Maui, if everybody don't know. I'm coming live from Oceanside. And then with ayahuasca.
Ayahuasca, right.
Ayahuasca.
The sunset. It looks so beautiful. Ayahuasca, it's the new medicine. Have you heard of ayahuasca?
Yes, I have heard of that. Yeah, that's that stuff that like natives trip out and like see their third eye, right? I hope I could do it one day before. That's bucket list. Yeah, you like have that ego death and then like opens up everything else.
What draws you to seeking this experience?
I like cannabis as medicine and it opens you up to a new perspective, so I can only imagine what other natural medicines and indigenous like things can tune you in. I think it opens doors for less selfishness and more selflessness.
What have you heard about this plant medicine, this hallucinogen, this drug?
It like makes people kind of go crazy, and there's like cults around it and stuff. Yeah, that's all I've heard.
Wow.
Oh, interesting.
Now, what do you think of this controversial tweet that's been making the rounds on Twitter?
I don't know. What do you think? I don't know.
Well then, folks, we have 2 more great perspectives about ayahuasca.
What the fuck is that?